Hi, Dr. Alex here, and welcome to a brand new audiobook of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, produced by yours truly and read by Bichard Rurton, as you can see here, and on screen slightly larger here. Now, this has been published through Findaway Voices, which was not something I'd initially intended to do because until now all the stuff I've produced in terms of audiobooks have been through Audible until this point. But this time I had to go to a new publishing avenue, which I'm very glad I did, which was Findaway Voices, as mentioned. And this audiobook is a brand new production in audiobook form, never seen before, and I think it's best if I just read the blurb at you. This is perhaps the most famous science fiction novel by perhaps the most famous, certainly the most famous British science fiction author of all time. With the invasion of the Martians, it even bestrides genres, crossing into horror. This reading has been produced by Alexander Leithes with the aid of his thespian friend, Bichard Rurton, doing his utmost to capture the spirit of his near namesake. So, as already mentioned, this has been published through Findaway Voices, and so it is available through Beak, Bookus Play, Bookmate, BAM Books A Million, Chirp, Click, Downpour, Everand, Google Play, InstaRead, Rakuten Kobo, Libro FM Audiobooks, Milkbox, My Audio Library, Nextory, BNN Audiobooks, Radish, Spotify, Storytel, TuneIn, uBook, Axiel, Baker and Taylor, Follett, Hoopla, MLOL, Odilo, Overdrive, Wheelers, and 3 Leaf Group. But it is not available through Audible, Amazon, or Authors Direct. Which brings me back to why did I choose to publish it through Findaway Voices rather than ACX and Audible, ACX being the company behind Audible. As you may already be aware, I have published my own work through Audible before. The Doctor Season 12, the Doctor Season 13, and the Doctor Season 14 will be published as an audiobook too, although I may publish it through Findaway Voices and just add into the list of distributors Audible as well, which I can do because, and this is why it was done this way, it's very easy to add in a book that you are the author of through Findaway Voices with Amazon. And indeed, if you've published your own book, it's easy to do it through Audible and ACX, and therein lies their problem with Audible and ACX. It's incredibly difficult to publish audiobooks that are from out of copyright works, such as the entirety of H.G. Wells, Edgar Allan Poe, much of H.P. Lovecraft, just for random examples, which anyone who wishes to can produce an audiobook for because it's out of copyright. But Amazon in the form of Audible seem to be incredibly obstructive, or at least not very helpful, in getting any audiobooks through which are derived from out of copyright works of fiction. Hence why I ended up having to use Findaway Voices, and they were very easy to use. I'm very pleased with them so far, and as I say, I may even use them when I don't necessarily have to for doing the Doctor Season 14 in the near future. One final thing I'd like to talk about with regards to this amazing audiobook which is now being produced is the incredible vocal talents of Bichard Rurton, who read the entire audiobook. My good thespian friend did an entire read-through of the book, and his initial efforts were, while good, lacking a little polish in certain areas, and so I wrestled the whiskey bottle from his hand, sent him into seclusion in the Welsh hills, and made him read several sections again, in some cases entire chapters all over again, and in most cases some small parts were retrod by his great and booming voice, until we finally have the version you see, or rather hear, here. on Findaway Voices and through all the various distributors I've just mentioned. And so I hope you all enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed making it and indeed listening to it. And really that's all I need to say on the subject, but I will leave you with the audio sample that's available through already Google Play. By the way, at the time of recording, the only distributors who have finished releasing the audio are Google Play and Walmart. Links are in the description below. But on the Google Play version, there is a sample, and so I will now fade away slowly and let Google Play take over for me and give you the full sample of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, produced by Alexander Leithes and read by Bichard Rurton.
The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, produced by Alexander Leithes, read by Bichard Rurton. Contents. Book 1, The Coming of the Martians. Chapter 1, The Eve of the War. Chapter 2, The Falling Star. Chapter 3, On Horshall Common. Chapter 4, The Cylinder Opens. Chapter 5, The Heat Ray. Chapter 6, The Heat Ray in the Chobham Road. Chapter 7, How I Reached Home. Chapter 8, Friday Night. Chapter 9, The Fighting Begins. Chapter 10, In the Storm. Chapter 11, At the Window. Chapter 12, What I Saw of the Destruction of Weybridge and Shepperton. Chapter 13, How I Fell In with the Curate. Chapter 14, In London. Chapter 15, What Had Happened in Surrey. Chapter 16, The Exodus from London. Chapter 17, The Thunder Child. Book 2, The Earth Under the Martians. Chapter 1, Underfoot. Chapter 2, What We Saw from the Ruined House. Chapter 3, The Days of Imprisonment. Chapter 4, The Death of the Curate. Chapter 5, The Stillness. Chapter 6, The Work of 15 Days. Chapter 7, The Man on Putney Hill. Chapter 8, Dead London. Chapter 9, Wreckage. Chapter 10, The Epilogue. The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Book 1, The Coming of the Martians. Chapter 1, The Eve of the War. No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that this world was being watched keenly and closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. That as men busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacency, men went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter. It is possible that the infusoria under the microscope do the same. No one gave a thought to the older worlds of space as sources of human danger, or thought of them only to dismiss the idea of life upon them as impossible or improbable. It is curious to recall some of the mental habits of those departed days. At most, terrestrial men fancied there might be other men upon Mars, perhaps inferior to themselves, and ready to welcome a missionary enterprise. Yet across the gulf of space, minds that are to our minds as ours are to those of the beasts that perish, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes, and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. And early in the 20th century came the great disillusionment. The planet Mars, I scarcely need remind the reader, revolves about the sun at a mean distance of 140 million miles, and the light and heat it receives from the sun is barely half of that received by this world. It must be, if the nebular hypothesis has any truth, older than our world, and long before this earth ceased to be molten, life upon its surface must have begun its course. The fact that it is scarcely 1/7 of the volume of the earth must have accelerated its cooling to the temperature at which life could begin. It has air and water and all that is necessary for the support of animated existence. Yet so vain is man and so blinded by his vanity that no writer, up to the very end of the 19th century, expressed any idea that intelligent life might have developed there far, or indeed at all, beyond its earthly level. Nor was it generally understood that since Mars is older than our Earth, with scarcely a quarter of the superficial area and remoter from the Sun, it necessarily follows that it is not only more distant from time's beginning but nearer its end. The secular cooling that must someday overtake our planet has already gone far indeed with our neighbour. Its physical condition is still largely a mystery, but we know now that even in its equatorial region the midday temperature barely approaches that of our coldest winter. Its air is much more attenuated than ours. Its oceans have shrunk until they cover but a third of its surface, and as its slow seasons change, huge snowcaps gather and melt about either pole and periodically inundate its temperate zones.
Masters, mistresses, the Doctor requires materials in order to maintain the TARDIS and ensure continued functionality. He similarly requires carbon-based comestibles to sustain his own biological functions and existence. Master would never say this, but he requires aid beyond that supplied by this unit in order to acquire these. To aid the Doctor in his various tasks and creations, this can be most effectively achieved via Patreon or Substack subscriptions, or through donations directly to PayPal. Or if you desire physical goods in return for your contributions, written accounts of my travels with the Doctor are also available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Thank you, masters, mistresses.